The attached file that I've transcribed was originally sent to me as a text that contained a link which took me to a website that gave me a QR code that I took a screenshot of and then had it printed. And after all, that I had to scan the printed QR code with the same phone I had taken the screenshot with, and it somehow switched my phone into airplane mode. Upon restoring signal service, I was met with a puzzling screen that contained an address, but it was one of those pictures that you have to stare at. You know, the ones that work on the mind, like a twisted game of Where's Waldo. But I digress. I drove to the address and waited 5 hours before a man in a limo and nondescriptive clothing left a small notebook in the hollowed out stump of a tree on the other side of the duck pond. The pond was frozen, so I only had to walk in a straight line to recover the notebook that contained this message: "Thank you, but the princess is in another castle." A hassle, I know, though hardly impractical. If you really want the story, send a sample. I was being directed to the central castle in that silly manner the crew over there in the security division like to code messages. And so, I went to the central castle and had to pay a lot of money to park really far away from my destination. The hit to my wallet meant that there was no chance I'd have the budget for an interview unless I was sneaky, and that kind of journalism is more of Shadow Squad's thing. No, I would not lay still in the grass for half a day to record certain people having brief conversations, even if that sort of intel is pricelessly valuable since it's candid and rarely censored. Working in Shadow Squad is a whole book itself, and to go into their history far exceeds the confines provided in this dossier. I got to the castle and waited in line till they called my name, and I was directed to wait in another room with lots of chairs and one small TV up near the ceiling. They called my name again, and I went to the back of the building to get a number, which I had to place into the machine once I passed security and the checkpoint. I had to remove my belt after forgetting that it was made with a metal buckle. But that's standard stuff, and the guard waved me through. And I came to a hall, and at the end of it was a room that was set aside from the courtroom, but surrounded in glass. The room was mostly offices, and I was assigned a public defender who had to speak to the judge on my behalf before I could begin the process of selecting. My defender's name was Pucky, and for what I could tell, she was so drunk that her words slurred to the point of incoherence. I was just glad to get out of that creepy room, inside a castle. The selection is like jury duty, and the judge would ask me if there was any sort of conflict of interest or biases toward the ministry and so on. I got through that sensibly enough, and that's when me and 11 other people were locked in a room with each other, so we all could decide on who will be next in line. I never would have thought there was such a complex etiquette and political protocol for that. Alas, there is, and there was no escape, even if I wanted to. However, we all agreed on things swiftly, and by sundown, I walked victoriously into the green room. They had no food, but only one vending machine that sold energy drinks for way more money than I had on me at the time. The TV was plugged in and was on, but had somehow remained to be set up. I tried to screen mirror it with my phone, but the TV was giving this vibe I can only describe as keep your hands to yourself type of attitude, so I made no effort to continue to try. I waited there and waited and waited and waited. I was about to just give up when a janitor opened the door and pushed a bucket with water in before giving me that get-lost look of his own. The man's earbuds were blasting some podcast I didn't hear what it was, and conversation was nonverbal. We used hand signals and gestures, and I determined that the castle was now closed. I would have to stay the night since the drawbridge was on an eco-friendly power-saving timer. I left the room and went to find a staff member who would help me. The hallways all looked the same at night, and with the castle now using green solutions, there was only a bare minimum of lighting. It seemed as though the staff had vanished, and I began to notice that the corridors were looping around the castle over and over. Still, no one appeared to help. Then, after I stumbled into the laundry room, I found a much more robust vending machine, and it seemed closer to the end of all that backroom's blasphemy. The laundry room was the oasis I needed. A change machine that accepted a debit card produced currency to dispatch delicious substances. It was also very warm compared to all of the drafty halls of the castle, and a second vending machine contained water bottles. I spotted an old arcade cabinet in the corner and an ice machine. So it was then only moments before a castle staff came by, and I had to quickly convince her that I was not an assassin, which was no easy thing to do as she proceeded to beat the living daylights out of me with a broom. If I hadn't seen the janitor's name tag, I would have been in a tough spot. I called the name out in desperation. The very same custodian instantly and suspiciously appeared out of thin air. The castle's caretaker said something to the staff lady in Armenian, and she stopped. Then she continued to go about cleaning the rooms, then depositing the laundry down the chute before leaving. I really felt bad now, knowing like zero Armenian beyond what I've heard during diplomatic briefings. What followed was an exchange of communications that were not verbal. I had to have the sequence played out over and over a few times before the janitor royale felt that I had a good enough feel to make it out. But make it to where? I found it was the justice version of guest rooms. Pretty much walk-in closets with nylon cots on cheap plastic frames. And unfortunately, the cot belonged to my new guide and manager, to whom I would become indispensable with if I ever hoped to get my story and get out of here alive. His Armenian name sounds like a profanity, so I just called him George. Since George worked nights, he was generously lending me his cot to allow me some rest. It wasn't that easy though, as any castle at night is full of all manner of noises. Having talking mice make inappropriate jokes that your expense is one thing, but when you're actually hearing a mouse insult you to your face, ranks up there as well. Eventually, I was tired enough to drift off into a restless dream state. My frisbee, I have to find it, I know. I also know that I'm climbing, not rocks, nothing that's solid. Of course, I'm in a tree. Every swing and shift of my weight makes the whole tree move. It is possible that these branches will hold me again if I move. If all these trees got thinner as one approached their top, then I had to find the frisbee before such a disaster occurred. How tall can a tree be? I keep climbing. I don't require opening my dream eyes. I climb by half feeling, but the other half is an astro me who hovers and keeps an eye on the climbing me. Why don't I help me out with a bit more information? I'm sure that hovering me is not the only one who can fly, but that me has the only open eye. I would know better than anyone as to the exact location of the frisbee. Maybe flying agent doesn't have my tongue right now. Climbing me is very opinionated and can verbally express, but it is unknown if any decibels are even something one can increase, let alone generate in a dream. This tree is competing with the Eiffel Tower. If I continue climbing, it will prove to be on par with those monolithic Chinese skyscrapers. I had enough. Seemed like I had spent days climbing blindly for a lost possession that, come to think of, it may not have been any possession of mine in the first place. So I grasped a branch and with both hands lowered my body to drop. At full extension of my body, my feet met with the grass, and I'm terrestrial again. Flying guy, however, he looks worse off, and then, wakey, wakey, a voice rouses me from sleep. Eggs and bakey, and upon my awakening, I was tasked to help in making breakfast. Now I have faced falling off cliffs. I've dodged knife-wielding attackers. I've talked down would-be jumpers. I've woken up underwater once. I've escaped death by the hair of my shiny chin-chin. But it's nothing compared to the horror of having to make someone else's breakfast without a cup of coffee. And there was so much coffee being made. There was no time to spare in the hustle that was quickly en route to chaos. Those cooks have one hell of a job. Who in their right mind wakes up at 3 a.m. and operates at top speeds without some kind of caffeine? They're probably sorcerers, or are using some kind of amphetamine. If they make their own drugs, would that make them wizards? By my definition, they would. They work their magic, and I would have fallen behind if they hadn't trained us for this very thing. All part of the process to obtain the next big interview. Was it worth it? Is it worth the trouble? Who do I blame if this falls through? If it ever happens that I end up figuring out when it happens in the first place. That was when I took the minute to review, and that sudden reprieve from work allowed me to take a shot of black coffee in a paper cup. One of those paper cups that you would take medicine in. I managed about 9 or 10 full shots of coffee in this manner before I trudged back out, only to discover the entire kitchen staff was gone. It sounded like everyone was now in the central headquarters dining hall. And as grand a spectacle as that architectural and social engineering monstrosity is, I would not be caught in there. Not alive anyway. Right before I quit being a redacted. Oh, look at that, they can expunge pretty much anything now, huh? Crazy times. Well, okay, so I won't go into that for this book. I'm sure the guys or security division will put a hit on me now, but I'm former redacted. So yeah, digressing. I stole a fortune cookie as I departed. I left across the drawbridge, and this is what the fortune cookie said. Asking you will find, but you must be specific. If it's not in the Justice Archives, it probably doesn't exist. That made the second most helpful fortune cookie I had ever cracked open. And yes, I do happen to have the first and foremost. Helpful fortune cookie, and of course, I have glued it to the record below. For the love of Crom, don't get involved with the stock market. They really have some brilliant writers. I hope they are at least paid well, but I seriously doubt it. But back to the quest. My next stop would be the archives. It was, however, a weekend, and that meant that they were only going to be open until lunchtime. I would have to hurry. This proved to be far more troublesome than I had anticipated, as every agent and bureaucrat in Central Ministry had been fed, caffeinated, and set loose. Investigators disguised as various woodland creatures filed into their briefing rooms to be subjugated to whatever brainwashing is needed, while coin counters and propagandists attempted to trap counterfeit gold productions. Sometimes the Punishment Corps agents take the less dangerous inmates to fulfill whatever social task is needed of them. The prospect of not making it to the archive in time began to weigh heavy. Would I have to stay in George's cot for another night? That was not about to happen, and thankfully, I'm an idiot. Well, I'm reckless, but in a good way. To make a long story short, I scrambled my way to the castle rooftop, and then sprinting merrily on top of them. I used my knowledge of Central's layout to navigate towards archive. There were a few loose bricks that gave out from underneath my feet, but only once, maybe every 20 steps. I did hear some screams and shouts, and things breaking, glass things. This was already turning out to be an adventure that was going to leave me bankrupt. I suppose I could have fallen to my death a lot up there, so there's that too. But I made it to archive just in time. If I hadn't been on friendly terms with the curator, my dramatic entrance from the busted bricks in the ceiling would have resulted in any normal agent being reprimanded. No doubt, there would have been charges made to accounts, and those accounts would ask me to suffer in some way that equals to the hole in the ceiling. But then again, archive was always poorly lit. Maybe busting through the ceiling was what the place needed to brighten up a little. Either way, I twisted my ankle a bit and definitely broke that one little comfy chair. I dusted it off the pieces of brick and whatever was on the chair and strode on, waving at the agents who waved back unenthused by it all. The Central Archive is the hub of all information. Records are kept on everything that happens in the realms. It is possible that things that do not happen within the realms is recorded and filed somewhere. But the fortune cookie was leading me here to find a story, and so I continued my investigations, which equated to more sneaking around. Libraries are great places to sneak around, and thanks to my dramatic entrance, I was already being actively searched for by Central Security. But my bearings on what I was looking for lacked in all that it's worth, until I spotted a book that was left awkwardly positioned on the floor. The cover read something like Fortune Cookies for Dummies 8th edition. Appropriate and oddly logical for whoever set up this loony scavenger hunt. So I checked the book out using my credentials and made my escape just in time to see the security team dispatched to archive. Not wasting any time, I went outside and sat down on a bench, then cracked open the book. Would all this turned out to be a wild goose chase? Was I bound to discover that all of this epic adventure had occurred entirely within my head? There was of course only one way to find out, and that was to read the stupid book. It seemed straightforward enough, but that doesn't count for much when you work for Justice Grimm. 3 pages into it, a small envelope fell out. The envelope was sealed with red wax, and the words were made up of stickers that one would maybe mark an address on a mailbox. With that read top secret, followed by a 5-pointed star, which below was written with a Sharpie classified dossier, access restricted to high-level clearance staff. Only, now we're talking, I said out loud, but to no one in particular. I tore the envelope without ceremony and found it contained a miniature dossier. But before I could bring myself to read a book I found within a book within an envelope, I glanced at the back cover, hoping to find a review or maybe some synopsis. But my luck has a way of reminding me how jacked up its sense of duty is. The entire backside of the dossier was redacted. Okay, this is most intriguing, I said out loud again. This time I glanced in either direction to make sure no one could actually hear me. I'm not sure why I hesitated to open the dossier that now rested in my caffeine fuel hands. This was what I was looking for after all, right? Something uneasy had begun to stir in the cauldron that is my brain. I tend to question everything, and now my doubts were chewing to a degree that borderline on uncomfortable. What could possibly be inside the little pint-sized book that would cause a grim agent to second-guess himself? That's when I decided to take the dossier and return the fortune cookies for Dummies 8th edition. Mistake number 1. By the time I was back inside archives, I found myself being pursued by some irritable-looking security guards. Tossing the book off bought me some precious seconds that I used to evade my pursuers in a maze of books and shelves. I could run and try to zigzag my way to freedom. However, there were 3 guards, and the moment that they synchronized their efforts, I would be caught. Outsmarting these guys was my best bet. So once the record keeper's desk came into my view, I dove behind it, just as the guards rushed by. One of them stopped half a moment to look above the abandoned desk, but he did not see me as I was bracing myself with my limbs like a reverse vice. The guard kept his brisk chase, and I thought I was home free. A record keeper walked up and then pushed a chair up, then began to work. I had to keep as motionless as possible, but eventually I cracked. I sprang out with all of my might, nearly tossing the whole desk upward, before it could register with security what was going on. I had bolted to the exit. A fire alarm acted as my one last distraction in case they had people watching the doors. After that, I managed to disguise myself among the outflowing of agents and record keepers who were following their training and exited the building in an orderly fashion. With the dossier still in my grasp, I walked out of the building as casually as possible. Cameras are, however, not as easily fooled as most people, and it only took the guys at Surveillance Division half an hour to identify me. The way I saw it, to catch me was going to be a very difficult thing to do, since within that half hour, I was now in the middle of Forestry Division's territory. Everything happens in the forest, so I figured this would be the perfect, if not the only place I could read this dossier in peace. Pine trees and sentinels appeared infinite like palisade walls, and all sounds seemed to be hushed around me. It was way too quiet even for the forest. A distant howl of a wolf, probably Skull. Poor thing. She seems to be losing her sense of smell every year since Chief died. I wasn't going to be alone out here at least. Softy agents eventually found me, but word had not reached them about my break-in at archives. They did offer me some work though, and I accepted just to shift any suspicions away from my unannounced presence. I was given an axe and shown a wood pile that was as long as it was wide, and it was enough of both to make visually seem as though the end of either length or breadth difficult. If security ever came looking, all they would have seen was the forestry guys cutting wood. And it's possible that the forestry folks still hold a grudge towards the Central folk for whatever reason, but short of any treason, they wouldn't turn me over to Central. Not when they could have me agree to a typical punishment there in Forestry Division fashion in the first place. Indeed, I was accepted into their fold, and soon I was assigned a bunk bed with a chap named Wilhelm, a step up from the service corps cots in Central. Coffee is a given, and I was glad I can drink it black, because there was no way I was going to request cream or sugar from Forestry Division. For the better part of a fortnight, I lived in this pattern. Chop till I drop. Then to the stream to wash, then straight to bed. Maybe snack on a ginger root, then breakfast, then chop, drop, repeat. The whole time the dossier remained unread, and not even once did I get the temptation to read it. Temptation wasn't even necessary. The tiny book had become Wilhelm's favorite bedtime lullaby. I had the top bunk, so I never really had the energy to move, let alone ask to read it myself. But I digress. Helmet Man, or as I came to call him, the Wind, for reasons other than the implied name windmill idea that comes to the mind. On my last day, the Wind came to me, and after a hearty slap on my back, he told me that I was wanted, and there was a bounty on my head. I guess the longer I was missing, the more they were pressured to find me, and enough time had passed as to require a felony arrest. The Wind assured me that the Forestry Division would not turn me in, but the look he gave me suggested that I needed to go deal with it and leave the softies out of it. He handed me the dossier and said, "You have more than earned this." It really blew my mind there at the end, so just a heads up. Not wanting to hear any spoilers, I briskly ran away from the Wind for the last time. Forestry Division is full of the most savage monsters who are superhuman at best, but they keep their mouths shut. I don't think I will ever be able to eat pancakes again. Moving on. Any creative intel agent knows when to call it quits, and so I turned myself in. The only request being that I would be allowed to read the dossier. And upon my completion of it, I would be squared away. This meant that by the math, I could read one sentence each night. Working for the Punishment Corps has left me a taste for sublime discipline, and it helps to know who your jailers are. The time went by awfully slow, but in the time the story began to take a more colorful shape in my head. They wouldn't let me take notes, so I've recreated the dossier with a more or less form of patchy memory.
Stop. Cut. 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 That's enough. We are all out of space, so this can't be done. Leave it for the next book, or save it for the jury. Keep them wanting more, and we won't have to worry. But beware the snare of sequel, and keep the writing fresh. Don't delay too long, or they'll lose interest. Indeed, it's looking better, and better and better each day. Make no mistakes, and you'll be okay. However, I must insist you stay the story, as now I worry. And if you recall what I said about taking notes and sharing things with me, forget all that nonsense on account should you be sharing anything. Perhaps they will, but in all likeliness, they will not. You might even find yourself questioning Grok. Question authority all day long, that's just fine. But do it so it's not being done on the taxpayer's dime. Unofficially, this project has long been overdue. However, there is no escaping how much they really loathe you. And I mean next-level malignant hatred that one would not expect from a dedicated patron. The same for the penmanship of which you are an alien. The chicken scratch manuscripts are endless frustration. I am patient and forgiving, but unto a degree. If you can find it in your heart to take it easier on me. Just remember our motto about following pain and the endless possibilities that reward your suffering. Anything else? Don't hesitate to ignore my calls. After all, I'm your editor, not a senator sitting idle in the halls. Final thoughts? I know not, but nothing is real. And if everything's permitted, I can see the appeal. With regards and reserved splendor, that's a lazy rhyme, but it's better your ever understanding editor.